Okay. What was big in the tuning scene 15 years ago compared to today? So that would have been
Like right when I moved out here. So, I mean, that was just getting into like our EFI system was really getting into
yeah.
hot and heavy swings.
So in let's just say 2005 range, that couple year period there. Um, the Audi, the old school, which now we consider the old school i5 market, that was really starting to heat up, and that's when I started 034. It was on the premise that like you can actually tune i5 motors like more than RS2 parts. And it used to be there was a lot of misconceptions. Say the guys that own C4S4s and Quattros and all those older cars that the RS2 turbo is the only turbo you could put on that car, and there was like some MTM chips floating around, and
Yeah.
there was nobody was like really tuning those. And so I was one of the first people to put like a Garrett T3 T4 on a 20 valve i5 or a 10 valve. I was one of the first people to build a header and put it on a 10 valve i5. People thought like the only exhaust manifold that will work is the RS2 exhaust manifold. It was really dumb. And then I had friends doing Integras and Hondas and Fords, and they had like all these awesome parts to play with. And guys in Civics were making like 500 horsepower with T3 T4 turbos. And I would go into the Audi world, and I would say, "Oh, that won't work. You can't put that on."
Yeah, you have to run a KKK turbo,
Yeah.
they're oil only, and all these other.
So right around that time, I'd say 0506, the market really started getting it, and that ultimately helped us launch 034. And so the i5 stuff was starting to get aftermarket turbos, aftermarket tuning, headers, and exhaust systems and things like that.
Yeah, we were doing like full like chipsets for the C4S4 for up to like 30 Rs with big MAFs and all kinds of crazy stuff. So
Yeah, so that i5 market was really hot. Now the 180 market and the 217 markets were still shit shows.
yeah, the support was pretty terrible at
And
that time.
there was no good tuning support. There was still there was this throttle cut issue because nobody knew how to really program the
Yeah,
ECU
you know what a
correctly.
PCD is? A throttle cut
Defender.
defender. I mean that was like the hot
Fuck
like
yeah.
industry like revelation was some diodes and some resistors to just
Yeah.
trick the ECU into not cutting the throttle and shutting the throttle on you. So
And I remember, I think it must have been '06. I was at Laguna, and one local guy. I think his name was Tanner. Um, he bought one of the first AWE Stage 3 turbo kits for the 2.7. This was like a big deal. It was the first aftermarket turbo kit that was released for the 2.7, and the power gains and everything were. And so he got it installed, and he went to Laguna, and the car just ran like shit. And I remember like passing him in my A4, because the car was running so bad. And that was ultimately a tuning issue. AWE developed this turbo kit. They threw some Bosch green tops,
yeah,
which was like 3 generations older injector. And then they had some like really horrible GAC tuning on it, and it took them years to finally get that tune fixed. So the good tuning for 180s and 270s didn't really come around until like 5 years later. But we saw that as a huge opportunity, so we were selling full standalone kits for the 2.7 and the 180. Admittedly, it wasn't for everybody. Just now, like now, you don't necessarily want a standalone on your RS3 or whatever, but back then it was the only way to actually get control. We'd take the drive-by wire off and convert it to a cable, and once you did that, we made it so that the ABS would work, the air conditioning, everything else would work, and you had full control over fuel, timing, and throttle, and so that ultimately we had customers with 2.7s making 800 horsepower, while people who were trying to do chip tuning and making 500 horsepower, the cars would barely drive.
Yep.
And then 1AT stuff was really heating up. We did a lot of standalones for 1ATs, big turbos, GT30Rs, 35Rs on 1ATs, 2 liter 2 liter builds left and right.
Yep. Yeah, stroker builds.
But I think like kind of how we talked about at the 10-year one, DIY was like really.
Oh yeah,
there was real DIY going on.
The amount of like polished, complete products you could buy for anything Volkswagen Audi was very slim. There were not a lot of companies.
We didn't sell a finished, complete product.
No, it wasn't expected either in the industry. I mean, most solutions you had to cobble together from either a couple different vendors or kind of source it and figure it out yourself. That's just how everything was, and it was very different time.
I'm trying to think of anything else notable, but I mean, also there was this thing like you can't turbo the 7A.
Oh, the coupe, the coupe quattro
like
motor,
the old coupe quattro motor, which was the normally aspirated 20 valve motor from the factory.
Yep.
It was the AAN 3B motor with a few small differences. And so I threw rods and pistons in one, and I ended up making over 800 wheel with it. And people were just like, "That won't work. You can't. The 7A won't handle boost. Like the engine blocks are the same. Like you just have." And so I worked with a machinist, and I built this jig fixture to machine the 7A head for coolant. The coolant manifold, and the 7A cams actually worked great for turbocharging.
Yeah, it wasn't some rocky, lumpy drag racing cam like some people.
Turns out it was just a stock cam.
Yeah, some people said it would be like.
But it had more duration and overlap than the turbo cams, and so it definitely made good power up top.
Yep.
So yeah, I think, and e-commerce was just getting going. Although we've always done e-commerce since the very beginning.
Yeah. Forums used to be a thing.
Forums,
much less social media.
No, there was no social.
It wasn't
media.
Facebook.
No
it wasn't.
I don't even know
Instagram. It was.
I don't even know, when did YouTube start.
Yeah, YouTube wasn't nearly as
all that stuff is barely getting going. It's definitely a different world.
Yeah, it was mailing lists and forums.
So. Yeah, mailing lists were just dying off. Forums were really taking over. I mean, we launched Motor Geek in 03.
Yeah, 2 or 3, something like that, probably.
Good stuff. All right. Ultimately, I much prefer what we're doing now.
Yes.
And the state of cars in general. I mean, in 05, the cars people were tuning came with 150 or 200 horsepower, and you could get them to 3 or 350 reliably. Now stock cars are starting at that point, and we're doubling the power. And we get complaints about drivability or everything's not perfect. You guys don't even know.
Oh yeah.
If you weren't tuning cars 15 years ago, you're so spoiled.
Yeah, you can go on track now with basically a stock car,
Mm-hmm.
and leave with it still running. That was not something you could do in like 2001, 2000 through 2000, like I don't know what 10, 15.
And I think starting with like the Mark 7. Even the Mark 5 and Mark 6.
Mark 5, Mark 6, Mark 5.
Those were nice.
They were new at that time. They would have been brand new in 2005.
But
so they were
I think
on track. It was
once we hit like B8 era,
for the B chassis, yeah. Good, but like B5A4, that was a struggle to keep happy on tracks. S4s were tough to keep happy on track.
S4s they're just
heat management.
Too much heat.
Yeah. Mark 4s weren't great. Same thing. Heat, and the 1AT just didn't like to be pushed that hard. Without a lot of work.
That I remember the first time I drove a Mark 5, I was like, wow, this is a nice car.
Yeah, the Mark 5s where things really started to come together.
Stock, it was like really quick. It was a really nice car. It handled well, but the power, it was like what you could do with the 2.0T compared to the 1AT.
Yeah, direct injection was just night and day for those motors.
And the KO4, I mean, the 1ATs, they really screwed them with turbo sizing, but then the motor's just not as sophisticated. So you get the cam timing and all that stuff.
The engine management wasn't nearly as refined. The yeah, the direct injection really was a game changer in and of itself. So yeah, it was a huge leap. It wasn't just a 0.2 liter displacement jump. It was a pretty massive
Yeah.
technological advancement.